We're having like French wine fest today. It's great.
We are having French wine fest today, Amanda Puck.
Yes.
My name is Belinda Chang, and I think I know a lot of the people here. There are a couple of new faces, which we're always excited to see. Welcome to everyone. This particular episode, the first seating, if you will, for this evening is for Loire Valley wines, our good friends who live in beautiful castles and along the longest river in all of France, the Loire River, the Garden of France. It's a beautiful place that I can't wait to return to. But since we can't go there right now in real life, we can go there virtually. I have 3 wines today, and you can actually see them. Christina has them in her background that are particularly special. Thanks, Christina. So these are all available in one of my favorite wine shops on earth. It's called Terry's, and it's in the West Village in Manhattan. I love to support right now in this time all of the small sort of family-owned businesses and local businesses as much as possible. They can definitely use our help. So the first wine that I have in my glass is Sancerre. So Sancerre comes from the easternmost part of Loire, even though they call this winemaking region the Centre de Loire. It's the center of France, but it's the easternmost part of the Loire Valley. And as you move across the Loire Valley from the ocean into the center of France, you have a change in, of course, the terroir and the soils and a little bit of climate, and a change in the grapes that they use. So when you get to the central of France, the Centre Loire, you have white wines that are made from Sauvignon Blanc and red wines that are made from Pinot Noir. So these are always a perfect aperitif. Got a little Sancerre. I hope everybody will raise a glass in toast to a lovely hour together. And, you know, give it a little swirl if you're not afraid to get it all over whoever's next to you. Put your nose in. I mean, you have to always appreciate the beauty of the wine in the glass, and then also the beautiful aromas, and then the flavors, of course. So for me, Sancerre is always crisp, racy, light, bright. Depending on the producer and the quality of the Sancerre, you can also have a gorgeous, supple, textured mid-palate and some rich notes on the end as well. You also tend to have kind of little minerally, sort of sea salty stuff, which is why it's a fantastic thing to have with oysters. So the first thing we're gonna do, well, I'm gonna do, if you'd like to do it, you're welcome to do it, to make my dinner is to make a pretty classic dish, which you would have in the Loire Valley. So we're gonna make a little mignonette, you know, which is that sauce with vinegar and shallots or onions. A mignonette is always really easy. So shallot or onion, pepper, really good salt. I have some cool French salt that I bought the last time I was in Paris. And then we're also gonna add some wine vinegar. You know, when you do the whole like with like thing, it's always good to use vinegar from the region that the wine is from. So if you're doing something with champagne, it's fine to use champagne vinegar. If you happen to have some Loire Valley vinegar from the last time you were there, you could do that too. I'm gonna put those peppercorns in, and then I think I actually have a mignonette. I'm gonna whisk it. I mean, is that what it looks like in the restaurant? Maybe smaller pieces of shallot, right? We're gonna do some oyster shucking, and I'm putting on my glove so that nothing bad happens. This is Isabelle and oyster. I got them overnighted from Rod Brown's place in Maine, which is called Brown Trading. And it's a really incredible place where when I worked for Charlie Trotter here in Chicago, we bought our day boat scallops and our lobster. Everything came overnight, and we had all this beautiful East Coast seafood all the time. And I know we have a lot of New Yorkers here, so it's easier for you to get, but we can even get it here in Chicago, which is great. I ordered, I think, really last minute, maybe yesterday, because I didn't realize you could get these Belle and oysters, which are classic in the Loire Valley. They have that kind of green shell and a very specific flavor. You could get them here. So they came like this. So I assume you take off the rubber band. There you go. Amanda's got a few. The way it goes, I was taught, is you take your oyster shucker and you try to make a lollipop. So you kind of fiddle around in there near the hinge, and you try not to stab yourself. Amanda, do not stab yourself. I was also told if you don't have the glove, you know, use a kitchen towel, fold it over, put that oyster in there, and it takes a good bit of pressure and a lot of wiggling. So I'm cutting the oyster, the bellon, away from the shell, and this one's ready to go. So I can't wait. So I'm going for a moment, and I'm going to put a little bit of that mignonette into my oyster.
My supervisor just fired me and he's doing it now.
Oh, good. All good. Well, then I'm going to slurp here and have my canapé. Ready? Oh, real good. Okay, so it's always important to follow that with a little sip of wine, right? You've got the vinegar and the pepper and that kind of briny, sea salty situation. And with the Sancerre, it's pretty perfect. But I know that a lot of people out there also have this Muscadet, which is also from the Loire Valley, from a little closer to the ocean, all the way to the ocean almost. Like we said, this one is from Melon de Bourgogne. I see it down in New York. Mark Cheese got a bottle of the Pepiere. I know Julia has one too. So we're going to have a sip of that. And I think that's going to be really nice and sort of cleansing. And this is even closer to where you find all of the oysters. And this one really has a lot of minerality. The interesting thing with Muscadet is they're also allowed to allow these white wines to spend more time on the lees, which we talked about last week. That's the dead yeast cells, right? That still have some flavor and some texture to give to a wine. So when they say extended aging sur lie, which they do in some other regions of the world, that means you're going to get something that's a little kind of like toastier, briochier, have more texture, and have a little more richness to it. So if you're doing kind of richer style oysters, right, like those really creamy ones from the West Coast, like the Kumamotos, and those ones that are kind of almost buttery, I think Muscadet is going to be a really fun wine match. But like, what's not good with oysters?
Oh, Belinda, Belinda.
Yeah.
Question. How long can they extend the aging?
I mean, for months, and in the case of some sparkling wines, for years. So when you have something that just has like a lot of richness and texture, sometimes that comes from alcohol, and sometimes that comes from extended aging where they don't decant and or they don't rack the wine off of all the dead yeast cells and or the dead skins, which they call the pumice. So leaving the wine in contact with all of those different things can do a lot of good and make the wine a lot more complex and interesting and change the texture. So for this next dish, I am going to get some bacon going. So we need to have the pan a little warm. I've got 3 slices of bacon, and some shallots might end up in there too. So I'm going to fry the bacon until crisp over moderate heat. The next part is making a little mustardy vinaigrette this time. So we've got some grapeseed oil, and then also some vinegar again. And there's going to be some walnut oil and mustard, Dijon mustard, of course, pepper, and the good French salt. Always the good French salt. This one's called Grand Cru de Bottes, and I've been saving it just for you. You never use it for myself. So that's all going to get whisked. And we've got a little vinaigrette. And I love chicories during the winter, right? Escarole and endive and all that good stuff. So it's going to be a chicory salad with some bread, with some good, delicious Loire Valley goat cheese. And while we let that vinaigrette kind of come together and my bacon cook, I'm going to open my 3rd bottle of wine. So a few people have the Denis Jamain, who I mentioned is a great guy and super fun, in Reuilly, but I have a Sancerre rosé. Both of these are rosé wines from Loire Valley, both made from 100% Pinot Noir. And it's got a little bit of chill on it. And even in the winter, I drink my rosé and my reds and my whites with a bit of chill. It's chilly here, but wines always taste better when they come from, cellar temperature or even a little chillier. We have great wine glasses. They open up really nicely over time.
Belinda, I have a Muscadet question.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so that wine, I don't have it right this second. However, It is one of my like favorite wines of all time, and I don't know how I found it, but I did. But I purchased it like that exact wine like 3 or 4 times.
Oh, nice, good.
I love it. So like, what about it? I always ask you this question. Is it like? I feel like when I can actually smell it now because I love it so much. It has like that melony, like tropical flavor, but it also has that minerality that if you do have it with an oyster, like to me, like that kind of wine and oysters are like the perfect combination.
Well, it's interesting because it's a great example of terroir and that adage, what grows together goes together. But 2 things. One, that Melon de Bourgogne grape, which you don't really see in other places, but you always see in Muscadet, is not native. Most of the grape varietals that have been in the Loire Valley for so long were planted in the Roman times or before, but this is kind of a new convert and a new transplant because they had some disasters a couple centuries ago. And they realized that this was a great grape variety for that particular soil type and exposition, and also the proximity to the water. So, there's some great examples of wines that are grown with oceanic influences. And, in my little mind, just as I believe that fermentation is like a Pac-Man game, right? Pac-Man is the yeast and it's eating all the dots, and that's the sugar. And then the ghost, Inky, Blinky, and the other one are the bad things that can kill the yeast, right? Too much alcohol, too cold, too hot. So I think about this oceanic influence, like, these beautiful breezes blowing into the vineyards and like some sea salt plunking itself onto the grapes, which is not the actual science of it. Sorry, Ken, we've got a chemistry professor here, but it is sort of how it works in my mind. And indeed, these wines that have this ocean influence, it's no wonder that they have that particular aroma, and they're always fantastic with that plateau, that fruit de mer that we love to order. But the other part of that, Amanda, is that extended lees contact and aging this white wine, which can be really racy and bright and high toned and almost acidic, but in a wonderful way. It kind of mellows it a little and gives it a really spectacular texture. That's a little different. So
it's great. The grape is Melon de Bourgogne.
Yes, that's correct.
And then what is Muscadet is
Muscadet is the name of the appellation.
Got it. Okay. All right. That's why I thought in my mind, like the grape was Muscadet, but it's not. So now.
Yeah. And it's also, that's a great point that you bring up. The Loire Valley is a part of, the old world, people whose, grandfathers or grandmother's grandmother, planted the vines, and they've been making the wine and perfecting all the techniques, even though they feel quite modern and fresh and bright and delicious in these times. But, back in the day, they named the wines for where they came from. And then there's a set of laws that governs it all, the AOC laws, Appellation d'Origine Contrôlée, that dictates quite a lot when it comes to French wine. They can dictate, obviously, the grape varieties that you use, and also sometimes harvest times and the level of sugar at which you can harvest these grapes, and oftentimes whether you can plow or not. I mean, there are all kinds of regulations when it comes to wines in France, which is a great thing because, as you said, Amanda, like if you know that you love Muscadet, you're going to find Muscadet-esque qualities in all the bottles that you find out there that are labeled Muscadet. So that's why it's really rewarding, I think, to learn about French wine, because there's a lot of consistency. Whereas you can buy a Chardonnay, you don't know what the one from New Zealand is necessarily going to taste like, or the one from Australia is going to taste like. There's a lot of diversity in styles from that one grape. But Muscadet is pretty much Muscadet. I mean, there's some variation. Same with Sancerre. So I'm going to do a few slices of this tomato focaccia, and I'm going to spread a little butter and then goat cheese, the Crottin de Chavignol, which again is a super classic Loire Valley product. So we've got the good French beurre. So I'm going to put my goat cheese toast into the oven, which was preheated to 350. Christina, if you will do me the favor and set a timer so I don't set everything on fire here. I think it says to bake about 8 minutes.
Okay, 8 minutes starting now. Marquis, did you have a smoke alarm go off?
I have already disabled my smoke alarm when I moved in. So there's my little Loire Valley inspired salad. Thank you. Which I think will be fantastic with the Sancerre Rosé. I think it'll be delicious with the Sancerre and the Muscadet. This has been such a fun evening. I hope that everybody got to sip a little something and ask any questions